Today, according to our regular class schedule, it says that we are going to actually continue talking about adverse selection and moral hazard and things like that. However, I thought that it might not that might not be the best use of time, because I think our discussion last week, or 2 weeks ago rather, of adverse selection and moral hazard were pretty effective and thorough. So I thought it might make more sense to move ahead to our next topic, which is about money, the most basic financial asset of all. So we'll talk a bit about money, talk a bit about ideas that might come up and that might be about what it is that money is actually doing. That's one important question. What function does it perform? How it's defined, what gives it value, things like that. What kinds of money there are, and also what is the money that we use today. And this will be our springboard for then on Wednesday and weeks going forward, talking about other more complicated kinds of assets. Okay, so why don't we do that and get started? So to start that discussion, I always find it useful to begin, excuse me, by actually looking at some different kinds of money, because some of the important topics that we're going to have to think about are actually appear pretty quickly by just looking at money. So here we have, I'm going to post this on the web when we're done. Here we have a sheet which has a scan of some different kinds of money from around the world. I collected these over the years, and this is, I think it's 5,000 Lao Kip, although I can't read this number, so I can't tell for sure. Here are 50 rupees from India, 500 dong from Vietnam, and 10,000 meticais from Mozambique. And all of these have something in common. They're all made of paper, right? But at the same time, if I had this piece of paper with me, I might have quite a lot of trouble persuading anyone to accept it here. So for example, look at this number, 10,000. So this bill is worth 10,000 meticais, which is the currency of Mozambique. But now consider the computer that you're using to log into this class, or whatever device it is. I'm pretty sure whatever device you're using cost you a lot less than $10,000. So now suppose I came up and I offered you this bill, this 10,000 metical bill for you. You know, it's 10,000. It's a lot more than you paid for your computer. Seems like a good deal, right? Or does it? Well, the number here itself, of course, doesn't tell us anything about how much this thing is actually worth in exchange. That's one issue that comes up from this thought experiment. But another one is that even if this thing were worth some substantial amount of money in terms of dollars, you still might not want to accept it. Because what makes, let's say, $100 bill useful for you? You can't eat it, right? Its value is certainly not connected to the material that it's made of, right? It's just made of paper. It's not $100 worth of paper. What gives it value is that you can spend it. In other words, if you go to a store, someone will accept that piece of paper, and they'll accept it for the value that's printed on it. So that means that for some reason, certain kinds of money are useful in some places, but not others. For some reason, it seems to be connected to the country or to the government. That stands out here. Of course, paper money is not the only thing that we have. We also have coins, and so here are a couple of coins from my collection. And again, they all have a country on them, and I picked in particular coins that are no longer in circulation. This coin is square. Why would it be square? Apparently coins don't have to be circles. But it's from, you can't see it because it's all rusty, but this is from a place called British Malaya, which of course doesn't exist anymore. And this coin here, it says Da Manchu Guo. So this is from a country that used to be called Manchukuo, that no longer exists. It was a small piece of North China that was briefly occupied by Japan. They set up a government there, called the place Manchukuo. A few years later, it was gone. In the meantime, they set up their own currency. Here is an example of it. But now, whatever value it might have had back then, its only value now is as a souvenir, really. And here's another one. This is the front and back of a coin. So this is the front, and this is the back. And if you look carefully, it says here that it's from, it says here that it's from Somalia. But here it says, has three other letters. It says F, A, and O. Maybe you can see it. Here's an F, whoops. My pen isn't working. Well, never mind. Here's an F, an A, and an O. So think about whether you know what FAO is. FAO is not a country. It's the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. So you can see here this coin is from the year 2000. That was a time when Somalia didn't really have a functioning central government. So the United Nations was there doing some of the things that governments do, trying to help out. And one of the things that they thought apparently was urgent, that normally governments do, is provide a currency. So the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN had these coins made and sent in to make sure people had something to use as money, which suggests that money is something very important. What is it that money does that's so valuable? Well, that's one of the things that we'll look at today. And why is it connected to governments very often? We'll think about that too. Finally, what is it that gives money more value or less value? Because again, these numbers don't seem to be connected to anything in particular. We'll think a bit about that as well. To underline the idea that, excuse me, money has, that the numbers on the money aren't connected to the value of the thing, here is another example. So this is a piece of money from a while back. Well, it's from 1923, in fact, so this is almost 100 years old. And this one is a scan of one that belongs to another professor at GW. His grandfather gave it to him. And I don't know if anyone can speak German. Do you know what it says here? If no one speaks German, I'll translate it. It says 3 billion marks. So mark was historically the currency of Germany, and this piece of paper was worth 3 billion marks. At the same time, you would probably have not been able to buy anything with this. So again, the number here doesn't really tell you much about whether you can get a lot or little for it, because of course it depends on other things. Actually, intuitively, you might feel, in general, things are valuable when they're scarce. At least that's one reason something might be valuable. You flip that idea on its head, things are worthless when there's a lot of them. So maybe you could have a situation where the government just printed so much money that it's utterly worthless. And that's what happened in this case. So let's keep these ideas in mind. So what's used in money seems to vary across space and across time. The value of money seems to be not connected to what the money is made of, right? Even these coins, their value is, these are just coins made of cheap metal, just the same way this paper money is made of cheap money. However, if you think back further in time, you'll realize, of course, that may not have always been the case. If you go back a few hundred years, you enter a situation where the coins aren't made of cheap metal, they're actually made of gold and silver, right? And in that situation, of course, the value of the money is connected to what it's made of. So there must have been some transition from a time when the thing that you use as money is a thing that actually has value by itself, and then the money is actually just a weight, right? Weight of gold or weight of silver in those examples. As opposed to now, where again the value of money is no longer connected to what it's made of. One of the things we'll want to do is to think about what kinds of properties of objects make them useful as money or not useful as money. We'll do that in a sec. And finally, before moving on, I do want to tell you a little story about this particular kind of money, because it's an exception to something that I said earlier, which is that, if you went around the streets of Washington, D.C., you'd probably have a hard time finding anyone who's willing to accept any of these objects in trade. Although, of course, if you offered someone dollars, on the other hand, you probably wouldn't find it hard at all. So this bill is from Laos. If I remember correctly, this is a 5, so this is 5,000 kip. And I picked this up when I was in Laos myself. I was a student, I was traveling around, and I was in a town called Luang Prabang, which is on the border with Thailand. And when I walked around Luang Prabang, I noticed that, of course, it wasn't hard to buy something with local currency, the kip. But I also found that many stores posted prices in other currencies. They had, let's say you wanted to buy a bottle of water, there would be a price in kip, and the price in Thai currency, the baht, there would be a price in US dollars. There was even a price in Deutschmarks, which back then was the currency of Germany. So for some reason, while it might be hard for you to wander around DC with foreign currency and find someone who will accept it for you, in that area, for some reason, they were accepting multiple currencies in the stores. And why would that be? What's different about that situation that meant that their multiple currencies could circulate, although in general, in most places, they don't? So we're going to think about all of those things and try and think about them systematically today. Any questions, comments, or observations before we move on? If not, let's move on. So for this, let me try and share let's see. I'm going to, last time I used the class whiteboard. This time I'm going to try something a little different. I'm going to try and use the Paint application directly rather than sharing my screen. I'm going to share the application. And if you're having, so the first class I was sharing the full screen, not just an application, and I was told a couple of people had trouble seeing it. In the other class, I've been sharing the application, not the full screen, and people have been finding it smoother. So let's try that today. And if for some reason you can't see what I'm doing, I'll switch and we can use the whiteboard. Okay? Great. So let's start with the obvious question. We're talking about money. Oops. What is money? Well, we've been talking about um, money in all your econ classes, although it wasn't always explicit. And of course, what is it that we're doing with money? What we're doing with money is that whenever anyone buys something, we're paying them with money. So that seems like a good definition of money. Money is a means of, the textbook is going to say that it's a means of exchange. In other words, when there's a transaction, you give a person an object or an item or a service, and they give you money in exchange. Another way of putting it, which I think maybe is more intuitive, is to say that money is a means of payment. So there's a standard thing that you give people when they provide you with a good or service, and we're going to call that thing money. Of course, it's implicit in that description, though, that you don't necessarily have to have money in order to have a transaction, right? We could instead have a situation where, let's say, you give me something I want, and instead of me giving you money, I give you something you want in exchange. Let's say, what do I want? I don't have any right now, but as you may have noticed, I enjoy drinking green tea while I'm giving my classes. So I enjoy green tea. What is it that I provide? Well, the way I earn money these days is by teaching economics. So a barter might be that I give someone an econ lecture and they give me tea in exchange. Of course, that's not monetary trade. Trade of that kind, where I give you something and you give me something back, whether it's a good or a service, is barter. And so that's telling us that whatever money is really doing, it's not enabling trade. You could trade without money. But what we're going to see is, well, to see about what it is that money might be doing that is different from barter, let's set up a situation. How about the one that I just described? So we need, first of all, at least two people in order to have exchange. And let's say this is person one. And let's say it's me. I need a haircut. And as discussed, in order to have exchange, we need to keep in mind, well, in order to have barter in particular, we need to have two things. First, there has to be something that I want. And as discussed, the thing that I want most of all in this world is green tea. And then I need to have something to offer in exchange. And as discussed, the thing that I have to offer in exchange is that I can go and give econ lectures to people. Then there has to be someone else out there, someone who might have what I want. And let's call that person Jeff. Jeff Bezos in particular, because I ordered green tea from Amazon. Normally I used to buy it at the GW Deli, but I haven't been down to campus in a while, and so I'm getting it from Jeff Bezos. And what makes him interesting for this story is that he has green tea. The question then is, what does he want? Now, in order for there to be the possibility of barter, Jeff would have to want econ lectures, right? If Jeff wants econ lectures, then I could come up to him and say, "Hi, Jeff, do you have any green tea?" He'd say, "Sure." "What do you have for me?" And I'd say, "I have an econ lecture." He'd be like, "Awesome, I like econ lectures." So I would get my green tea, and then Jeff would get his econ lecture, and we'd all be happy, and we'd go on with our day. However, what if that's not the case? What if it turns out that Jeff doesn't want econ lectures? He doesn't like econ. Let's say he likes, anthropology. So he wants anthro lectures. Then I can say, hi, Jeff, can you give me some green tea? And he'll say, sure, but what do you have for me? I'll say, I have econ lectures. Like, Jeff will say no, right? In this situation, we cannot have barter trade. The way to put it is that barter, remember, requires me to like what Jeff has, and Jeff has to like what I have. We refer to that situation as a double coincidence of wants. So barter requires a double coincidence of wants in order to be possible. What about money? Well, let's introduce into this environment something. Let's just call it money. And just to make things more interesting, actually, never mind. There's this other thing that is neither of the things that we want, and we're going to call it money. Okay, and I've made it green. Now I come up to Jeff and I say, "Can I please have some green tea?" And he says, "Sure. What do you have for me?" I say, "Econ lectures." He says, "No, thanks. Do you have anything else?" And I say to him, "Well, I have this green piece of paper that I call money." Now, if he accepts it, then he will have taken the money. Now he has the money. And he will give me the green tea. Right? And then I'll be better off. Why would he accept the money? Well, what if there is another person out here? Let's call her Sarah. Just pick a name out of a hat. And what makes her interesting for this game is that she has anthro lectures. Jeff would accept this green piece of paper from me if he believes that later when he bumps into Sarah, she will also agree to give him what he wants, an anthro lecture, in exchange for that piece of paper. And why might she do that? Well, she would do that if she believes that when she later bumps into a fourth person who has whatever she wants, that person will accept it as well, and so on and so on. So you could have a situation with money if it's a situation where you believe that the other people in the society are going to accept money as payment. If other people accept money as payment, it makes sense for you to do so. And that's, again, possible in this situation, even though you don't have a double coincidence of wants. In fact, you could have a whole society with no double coincidence of wants and still have trade. So in this case, what money is doing is not ensuring that there's trade where none could have occurred, but it's ensuring trade where there are situations of single coincidences of wants. There may be double coincidence of wants out there. In those cases, trade can occur fine. But money enables it in these other situations. Okay? Any questions, thoughts otherwise? The next logical question is how would we sustain this game where people, or this belief rather, right? What matters here is the belief that the next person you bump into who has what you want is going to accept money. Well, one reason would be is if this money thing actually had some value by itself, right? What if it is, I don't know, actual gold, a precious metal, or actual silver? Then it wouldn't be hard to get a situation like this working, right? Because there's an object that is already valued in the society, and then maybe it's natural for certain reasons that we'll think about later to use that thing as a means of exchange. Objects, valued objects that have been used as means of exchange include, as we were just discussing, gold and silver and other precious metals, because you can weigh them and make coins out of them. But there are other examples of objects that have been used as money. One example is salt. So there are various stories about salt having been used as money, and the word salary coming from the Latin for salt. Not sure how true those stories are, but it is true that salt has been used as money, and indeed it's used as money right now in parts of Ethiopia, based on what I've read. Other things that have been used as money are rice. I heard rice was used as a means of payment in parts of East Asia. And I heard that pepper was used as money in some ports. Pepper used to be a very valuable commodity. It's very small, light, it's convenient to carry around, and very valuable. So pepper was used as payment, I've heard at some point. And so that way of solving the money problem, to have a generally valued object, is called commodity money. As we were discussing earlier, though, that is not what we have nowadays. Nowadays, we have some kind of money where what it's made of is there's no relation to how much it's worth. Right? All the paper money, the coins even that we use are made of cheap money. And then think about your G World, right? The deposits that you can access using your G World card, or any debit card for that matter. Those are intrinsically worth nothing. They're ones and zeros in a computer somewhere in a bank's computer memory. So that's not commodity money. We call that fiat money. So fiat money we're defining as money whose value is not connected to its use. Sorry, not connected to its intrinsic worth. Its value instead is going to be connected precisely to the fact that it is the standard means of exchange. And that's what gives it value. Okay? Any questions, thoughts? Now, in a world of fiat money, you might wonder, well, why is it that, or how is it that we continue playing this game, right? It all depends on the belief that the next person is going to accept the money from you. And that somehow feels a little shaky, maybe. In reality, I think, this is an opinion, that there is actually some property of the fiat money nowadays which gives some stability to the fiat money that we use, and that you can think of, if you can figure out, probably if you think about what kinds of things are likely to show up as commodity money. Remember, okay, gold and silver, they're precious metals, but what about rice and salt and things like that? What makes them useful, or one thing that makes them useful, is that a lot of people need them, right? Of course, it's easy to, if there were in this game that I drew, let's say we all want rice. then it would be natural to use rice as a means of payment whenever you get something else. So is there something with, let's say, US dollars, which is fiat money? Nonetheless, is there something that most people in the society have to do that they can only do with US dollars? Any ideas? Specifically, something we all have to do once a year, but we can only do with US dollars unless we're a farmer. Farmers can do this thing without US dollars.
Is it paying taxes?
It's paying taxes, right? We all have to pay taxes. So, and we are only allowed to do it with US dollars. So that means that in a sense, the fiat money is a bit like rice. It is something that we all kind of need because at the end of each year, we have to pay a quarter of our income or whatever it is in taxes. And the US government only accepts that. Another way to think about this is by thinking about the counterexample, which was from my little story from Luang Prabang. Why in that place do people accept multiple currencies? Of course, they're near the border with Thailand, and they're full of tourists who are going to go home in a few days and want dollars there. So for more than one currency in that place, there is this belief that the next person in the chain is going to be happy to take that currency. So that's so I think probably the fact that we all need to pay taxes actually lends some stability to the fiat money system that we have. So to sum up, we've figured out one thing that money does that makes it special. It's not something that makes trade possible, whereas it would be impossible without it, but what it does is that it, I guess one way of putting it is that it alleviates trade frictions. And that's what money is really achieving here. Any questions, thoughts, comments?
Can you argue that it also reduces transaction costs?
Right. So this is so that's exactly what I'm saying. So right, this alleviates trade frictions is basically the same thing as saying lowers transaction costs. Very good. That's way of phrasing it is useful because it ties directly with the way the textbook talks about it. They always talk about transaction costs. So yes, very good. So next, I think it would be useful to think about what it is that we use as money today in a more systematic way. So I said, well, we're using paper money and we're using coins and we're using bank deposits in G-World. Let's try and be a bit more systematic about that. So let's write money today. Now we can collect the paper money and the coins together and just give them a name. You're going to call the total amount of paper money and coins in circulation and just call it currency. Okay. So that's one part. Then another part, as discussed, is the money that is held in the form of bank deposits. So let's just define as a deposit that you can use to buy something with, either by using a debit card. Sorry, obviously I need some green tea. Either by using a debit card or by writing a check, We call those checking deposits. So if you add up all the currency and all the checking deposits, you're going to get a number or a measure of money or a definition of money called M1. Now, M1 suggests that there's going to be an M2, an M3, and so on, and there will be. The problem is this. Strictly speaking, what we use to buy stuff are these objects, currency and checking deposits. However, the problem is that there's some things that are, so to speak, almost money. For example, suppose you had not a checking account, but a savings account. One that maybe earns a bit of interest, and you can't use it to write checks on. Literally, that is not money, right? You cannot write a check on that account. You can't withdraw with a debit card, so it's not money. However, you could very easily pick up your phone if you have a banking app on your phone, press a few buttons, move some of the money from your savings accounts into your checking accounts, and spend it. So the issue is that there's some kinds of assets, in this example, savings accounts, that are so liquid, that are so easy to transform into money that economists may consider that maybe we should include them in the definition of money as well. So that's why there's something called M2, which includes M1, but also includes things like savings accounts, that are really, really easy to transform into money. The other element is there are these accounts called CDs, certificates of deposit, and what they are is that it's an account where you put the money in the account and then you promise not to touch it for a month or 2 months or something. Banks like it when you do that because it means that they know that that money isn't going to suddenly disappear because you can't spend it so easily. So CDs under 6 months are also included here. And that's M2. And then there's also M3, which is all of the above, plus, I guess logic might suggest longer CDs. So CDs over 6 months, where you promise not to touch it for a year, for example. And a few other kinds of accounts that we don't need to go into right now. Certain money market funds. What that suggests is that although we had a precise definition of money at the beginning, it's the means of exchange, in practice, there are some things that may be very easy to transform into money that are kind of almost money. So it makes it seem like money is almost a spectrum or a range, right? There's the most money thing, which is M1, which you use to spend. But then there's some things that you can't spend with, but it's really easy to transform into money. So it's like almost like money, but a little less. And then you have M3, which again includes things that are a little harder to transform into money, but it's still fairly easy. Just have to wait till your CD expires or pay a fee for using the funds early. And so that introduces this concept of how good is something as money, or how easy is it to turn something into money. And that concept is the concept of liquidity. This is one definition. How easy is it to turn something into money? The concept of liquidity is pretty broad. It's sometimes used to refer to how easy is it to find a buyer for something. Since someone is going to buy offering you, it means they're going to turn it into money for you. The definition of liquidity is applied to that as well. Sometimes people talk of the liquidity of a market. What they mean is, as I was saying, how easy is it to perform a transaction in that market? Sometimes the word liquidity is used to mean money. Let's say sometimes you may hear a phrase like, the Fed has increased liquidity. What it means is that or the Fed has injected liquidity. It means introduced more money into the world in ways that we'll discuss a little later. Okay, any questions, comments, thoughts about this? So this slide has 2 points. One is to introduce what we use as money today, but also, most importantly, perhaps, to introduce this notion of liquidity, the ease with which something can be turned into money. Right. Great. So finally, if you look at the text, it wants us to also think about two questions about money. One I was kind of hinting at earlier, which was there are various objects that have been used as money over time. So it's clear that money doesn't have to be of a particular form. The question is, what are the properties of objects that would make them desirable as money? So one, I don't remember the book explicitly tying this together, but when you're thinking about something that you would like, or that the society would likely agree on to use as a regular means of exchange, and this is true of all assets, but I guess it should be particularly true of something as crucial as money. If you're going to be offered something in exchange for money, you want to really be sure that what you're being given actually is the correct money, right? You don't want to be in a situation where there's fake money going around. For example, coins that don't contain much gold, but that are hard to distinguish from coins that are their weight in gold, or $100 bills that are real versus $100 bills that are fake and won't be accepted at some point. So that if there were that problem, that would be adverse selection, and that thing would not be useful as money. It would not be widely traded. So the way the textbook summarizes that is by saying that things that are used as money should be things that are easy to recognize. In the example of gold, actually, I read that a gold coin that's less than 92% pure is not going to shine. You can't polish it. So then you can easily see if someone is giving you a coin which has not enough gold or that isn't gold, because it doesn't shine when you buff it. That makes gold easy to recognize and probably means it's very useful as money. $100 bills have all sorts of magic threads and holograms and things in them to make it difficult for people to counterfeit them and introduce fake money into the system, and so on. So this ease of recognition applies to fiat money as it does to commodity money. Now, another thing that I mentioned earlier, as I was saying when I was talking about the use of pepper as money, I was saying they're small, and that makes it easy to give out 1 or 2 or 10 of them. So one thing that you probably want your money to be is divisible. Because if it's not, you can only use it for very large transactions, right? Imagine if the smallest dollar bill were a $100 bill. It would make it very easy for us to buy and sell smaller objects unless we only bought and sold in large bundles, right? It would be inconvenient. So divisibility is another important property of whatever it is that we use as money. That speaks in favor of things like bank deposits, right? You can pay as little or as much as you want. easily. You don't even need to. If we use physical money like paper and coins, then you always need to make sure you have some coins to make change, right? It's less if you have just a deposit account and a debit card, then it's much easier to just always be able to pay exactly what you want. So that's divisibility. Another one, again, that comes with the story of the pepper is I mentioned they're easy to carry around. You probably want money to be something that's very portable because, and this again comes up in the question of why is that we use paper money at all now? As discussed, just a few hundred years ago, we used to use gold as money. But large amounts of gold are a pain to carry around. Probably get robbed, aside from anything else, because it would be easy to see if you're carrying a lot of it around. So how wouldn't it be much better if instead you could carry around a piece of paper that just says on it, if you go to the bank, you can use this piece of paper and get gold instead. That's a lot more convenient, right? And it comes down to the fact that paper is a lot less portable, a lot more portable than gold. Incidentally, in that time when for every piece of paper dollars there was supposed to be a piece of gold sitting somewhere in a bank, you would describe that situation as saying that money was backed by gold. It's worth noting that money is no longer backed by gold. And there is something behind the money, so to speak, something that corresponds to it at a bank somewhere. But what that is something that we'll get to later in the semester. And for the most part, it's not gold. So it's no longer the case. So if all the money corresponded to a piece of gold somewhere, then we could say we're still in the world of commodity money, right? It's just that we're trading ownership of the gold in certificates rather than the gold itself. But that's not the case now. Okay. One last, I guess, obvious thing that you would want your money to satisfy is that it should be something that isn't going to wear out. It should be something that's durable, that keeps its value over time. Like gold coins are gold coins, nothing's going to happen to them, right? The paper money does wear down, so that's a bit of a concern there. The coins that we use do wear down, but it takes a really long time. So again, and the deposits that we use, I guess, are fine as long as the banking system continues functioning. So durability of whatever it is should be very important. So that's one list of basically physical properties that the textbook asks us to discuss, just to help us think about why is it that some things are used as money, something, and whereas other things are not. But there's another list, which maybe is more important down the road, and that is a list of the functions that money performs in society. Now, one we already talked about, which is that money, it's by definition, money is a means of exchange. So it's one function that it performs. And it does so because it successfully lowers transaction costs, as you were discussing. But there are other things that money does that we don't always think about, but are worth underlining. Notice that even when you were in economics classes before this one, whenever you are measuring the value of something, whether it's the price of an object or total GDP produced in an economy, we're always measuring it in units of dollars, or more broadly in units of money. So money turns out to be basically our measure, our unit for counting economic value. So the standard terminology for that is to say that money is a unit of account. That doesn't make money money. It's just that if we have a standard money, it's a natural thing to use to count value. Now, another thing about money that's natural to do with it if you have it, and this is related to the durability of the money, is that if someone gives me money, there's no reason, to the extent that it's durable at least, there's no reason for me to use it now. Right? If you have any money right now, you don't have to call Grubhub immediately and spend all of it on lunch. You could spend some of it tomorrow or next month. And so, at the same time, money is not the only way in which you could do that. Because as discussed, you could put that money in an account, or you could buy gold for that matter and then sell the gold later on. So money is one of many possible stores of value, which I guess is similar to saying that money is an asset. It's a bit of an unusual asset in a way, though, because the way you store value is that you get money by buying something. Sorry, you get money by selling something, and then you hold the money, and then you spend it whenever it's convenient, whenever you need to. And the issue is that what you can buy with money at the beginning when you get it, and what you can buy with money at the end when you spend it, might not be the same, because the amount of stuff you can get for a given amount of money changes over time. In fact, it usually goes down, or to put another way, prices usually go up, which of course we call inflation. And that's a problem. So with all assets, you always want to ask, what is the profit I get from holding this asset? I guess when you're talking about assets, we usually talk about the return, but it's basically the profit that you get from holding money. And the answer is that actually money loses value over time. It loses value over time with inflation. So at this juncture, it probably makes sense to have a quick look at what the inflation rate looks like, at least in the United States. You should now be able to see how inflation has been over various years. And you can see that, so if the inflation rate is above 0, you should remember this from macro, although we'll come back and revisit this later. The inflation rate is above 0, it means prices have been rising. The inflation rate is the growth rate of GDP. So this is 0.1 is 10%, 0.4 is 4%. Usually it's lower, right? Somewhere around 2.5%, 3% maybe. But it's always positive, with very few exceptions. The prices shrank around here in 1949. They shrank a bit here in the mid-50s. They shrank a bit here in 2008, 2009. And maybe a tiny bit here in 2014. But generally, prices go up. And what that means is that the return to money is usually negative. That's no good. But of course, we still use money and hold on to it. And why is that? It's because money is giving us something else. It loses value in terms of goods and services, which we call real value. I'll come back to that again later, because of inflation. But it's still a valuable asset to us, precisely because it is liquid. So this is important because just the same way that money is an asset that has a return, which turns out to be the negative inflation rate, which is not great, Other assets may have some return that's greater. We'll look at that soon. But all other assets also have some degree of liquidity. And so when you're trying to value an asset, you have to think about its liquidity as being one of its things, one of the important properties that you have to keep in mind that make the asset useful or not. Now, finally, there's one more thing that's a bit abstract that I want to mention about the functions of money, because there is a literature in economics of people, written by people who are thinking, as discussed, money is a means of exchange, but you can have exchange without money. It lowers transaction costs, but maybe there are other ways of lowering transaction costs. The question they're asking is there some fundamental function that money performs that would be very, very difficult to do otherwise, or impossible? What is the fundamental function of what money does? And okay, the key paper that introduced the following idea was called Money is Memory. What they meant was that money is a very simple form of keeping track of all the transactions you ever performed. So think about how, so if I have money, it means that I must have produced something in the past that was of value to other people, right? So in a sense, it's a summary of my past transactions. And in this paper, what they do is they imagine the two alternative worlds. Imagine one where there is this giant record, maybe a book, of every single transaction I ever performed, and you, and everyone else. And whenever anyone wants to buy or sell, to buy something, we open the book and see what their transaction history was. And based on what it is, the trade may or may not occur. The alternative is to have this simple thing called money, which I give you when I want to buy something. They argue that the two are equivalent because, again, the money is kind of a summary of what I've done in the past, a particular summary that says, well, I produced all this stuff and I have this left over. So I'm entitled to some goods right now if I so desire. And of course, that becomes part of your history. When you sell me something, you still have this money. It shows that you produced something valuable and makes a record of it, sort of. This is interesting because, of course, if you think about, I don't know, I don't think I discussed cryptocurrencies before, but the way they work is precisely in the way I just described. There are these computers that are keeping track of precisely all the transaction history of all the people who have cryptocurrencies. And again, in the end, they generate this summary, which is how much money there is in your Bitcoin, in your cryptocurrency wallet. But the way it's made functional is precisely by having this multiple copies of the full transaction histories of each Bitcoin or whatever it is, mainly as a form of security to make sure that it's hard to steal the currency, but still. So money is also, in that view, a very primitive yet highly effective form of record keeping of past transactions. Any thoughts or comments about that? Or anything else that's on this slide? If not, then I think that's roughly what we've done for the day. What I wanted to do today. If I'm not mistaken, we end at 2 normally. So that means we have a little time to do our end of class quiz. All right. Let's see how we do. Money can be defined as an object everyone needs, a widely accepted means of payment, something with no intrinsic value, or an object available in a fixed quantity. Very good. Seems everyone was paying attention. Sarah Marie is first. Second question. The ease with which an asset can be exchanged for money is solidity, solvency, liquidity, or durability. Ah, okay. Very good. Why might elephants not be a very good form of money? Are they not durable? Are they not easy to recognize? Are they not divisible? Or do they have no commodity use? All right. Elephants actually are very valuable. They're used for, I guess, farming in parts of Asia. So they definitely have use. Or you could eat them. TG is on top. Next, paper money these days is valuable because it is a means of exchange, it is backed by gold, it's made of paper and paper is valuable, or because it's a unit of account. What makes money valuable? All right, very good. And is this, okay, we're almost there. Which of the following is an example of fiat money? Gold coins, silver coins, salt slabs, these are salt slabs in Ethiopia, or bank deposits? All right, that one was a bit harder apparently. Now Marshall is on top. And last of all, barter trade requires which of the following? Fiat money, commodity money, a double coincidence of wants, or a single coincidence of wants? Waiting for the one last person to make up their minds. Okay. Very good. We're done. Let's see who's the winner today. Third place, we have Sarah Marie. Very good job. Second place, TJ, who was our winner last week, I think. And this week it's Marshall. Very good, Marshall. You have won. Ezra and Pilar were fourth and fifth. And now you get to choose your prize, which is to put a silly filter on me for the end of class. Do you have anything in particular in mind?
I guess an elephant, since it was in the question.
Elephants. Let's see if we have an elephant. We have two or more. Here is one elephant. I think they need to work on their programming. Here is another elephant. Okay, this one's awesome.
Better.
This one's really good. I'm going to save this one to my favorites. Well, thank you very much, everyone. It was great to be in class with you. I hope you learned something. And, well, let's talk again on Wednesday. Take care.
Have a great one.
Day.